Hello folks, it's David with URAL Motorcycles, and what I got today in the shop is a 2017 black Ural gear up. I built 8 of these back in 2017 for a marketing gig that we were doing, and this is number 5 of the 8. And while the other 7 were sold to retail after the event, this one ended up going for some R&D. And now, 2021, I got it back in my possession, and the parts that were replaced for the R&D effort are being put back to stock. So while I'm working on this bike, I thought I would film what I'm doing and show you how to remove the drive shaft and for the sidecar and the swing arm on the sidecar. Depending on the noise level in the shop, it might be a voiceover, or I might be actually talking to the camera if it's quiet enough. So yeah, let's get to it. First, we're going to start with our 13mm wrench, and we're going to remove the 2 hex bolts that hold on the coupling that goes to the drive shaft off the final drive. Then with our big 22mm wrench, we're going to get in there and break loose the axle bolt, or nut. At this point, I take my 17mm wrench and socket, and I loosen the pinch bolt on the axle. Nice and loose. Now I hold it with my punch, the axle in place, and then I proceed to take off the axle nut the rest of the way. This allows a little play on the axle so I can still get my wrench out. I'll explain later. Don't lose it. Remove the bolts. And remove the drive shaft off the final drive and the rear axle, and just set it to the side. Don't lose your hardware. Now with a 17mm wrench, you can remove the 2 hex bolts that hold on the caliper on the sidecar swing arm, and place the caliper gently to the side. Now, using something to pry against, you can pop off the hubcap, remove the cotter pin, and with a 27mm wrench or spanner or whatever you have, you can break loose the sidecar wheel nut on the axle, then jack up the sidecar, place it on a stand, and you can continue to remove the nut completely and remove the sidecar wheel and tire assembly. And don't lose your nut, put it in the hubcap. Now we're going to take the one-time use pinch clamps and pry them off. I'm going to do both because I will be servicing the splines and greasing them. So I'm going to remove both of them so I can take the rubber boot off completely. If you're not going to do this, you can just take the one that's inboard of the sidecar and leave the part that's on the coupling on. But I'm going to remove both for my purposes here. So I wanted to stop and clarify while we got this removed. You want to make sure that all the hardware is accounted for. So you have the main nut that goes on the axle and the washer. The washer sits on there, and then the nut. And then you have the two hex bolts that hold the coupler on. Now the reason we remove this is so when you're pounding the drive shaft out of the swing arm, it'll have enough room to come in and slip out without this interfering and hitting your final drive, or your muffler or the frame or something else. I loosened the axle pinch bolt before I finished removing the nut that holds the coupler on. It's because when you have the wrench in there, if the axle is being held by the pinch bolt and it's not able to move side to side, sometimes your wrench will get stuck in here as the nut is being unthreaded from the threaded part of the axle. So after I break this loose and break the hex bolts loose that hold the coupler to the final drive, then I'll loosen the pinch bolt, and that allows the axle to move in and out so I can get my wrench out and it doesn't get trapped in there. Additionally, sometimes when you're removing this piece or simply sliding it off the final drive or the axle, this little bushing will come out or be left on the axle. You want to make sure you collect it. And it's no big deal if it comes off. It just goes in the seal. And you just push it back in place when you reinstall it. Okay, so in a moment we're going to take our punch and our hammer and we're going to pound this out. But you want to make sure nothing gets damaged over here. So if you're by yourself and you don't have an assistant to help, you can wrap a towel around this and just let it guide itself out. Or you can take a large zip tie and hold it up like that, so it holds it up out of the way as you're driving that out. And once it breaks loose, you'll be able to come in and guide it out the rest of the way. So for this side, you got a couple options. I'm going to drive it out with my punch and a large ball peen. I'm going to put it right in that hole and tap it. But you have other options too. You can thread the castle nut on backwards to protect the threads. And then with a block of wood, you could use a hammer and do it that way. Or if you didn't have a block of wood, you could also use a rubber mallet. This is a distance washer on two-wheel drive. You want to make sure you replace that when it goes back together, and you should also inspect it for burrs or wear. This is a wear item, so it will need to be inspected and replaced periodically. Not that often, but yeah, you want to check these and make sure that they're okay. So as you can see, the zip tie thing worked. Now we can take that out. I laid a rag up here on the frame to protect the frame and the finish on the drive shaft. There, drive shaft out. This plastic piece that just fell, that's just a dust cover on the back. When you have all this apart, usually you've taken it apart for one reason or another. So you want to make sure that your bearings are in good shape. They're not moving around or grinding or crunching when they should have no play in them whatsoever and turn freely with no flat spots. You also want to inspect your spline collar here. Make sure that the teeth are in good shape, which they are in this unit. You want to inspect the input shaft here and make sure that these splines here are in good shape, and all of this is going to need to be re-lubed when you put it back together. It doesn't have to be a lot, just the finger swipe, but re-lube everything. You also want to check your U-joints, make sure that there's no play in them and that they move freely. This would also be a good time to lube your U-joints while all this is out and easier to work on. And then you want to check the splines at the end on this side that goes into the coupler that goes into the final drive. Make sure all these splines are good, the splines on the coupler itself are good, and you're going to want to check your splines in here, and while you're at it, just kind of give a wiggle to your disc. Make sure that the rotor buttons are not worn or overheated or losing their tension with the little wave washers on the back. If you had an incident where you were overheating the brakes, those can get warped or flatten out, and then your brake will wobble around, which can also lead to all kinds of different problems or noises that you think are a problem and aren't. So I'm going to stop here for this week, and we'll continue on next week, because this video is getting a little long. But at that time we will loosen the shock, get this swing arm off, and replace it with this new one. You can kind of see how the brackets are different. That's why I need to replace this. And we'll press some new bearings in here. I hope it was informative and you enjoy this kind of content, and if you do, give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we'll be back with you next week and we'll get into this some more.